We are recording live now on on Friday night, excuse me, after Purdue's what was it? I believe a 13-point exhibition loss to Kentucky in Rupp Arena. Um, just some general takeaways. Probably not a lot of super positive takeaways. I don't think from people on the Purdue side of things. Generally, not a ton of those when you shoot 3 for 17 from three and look a little clunky on offense. Exhibition painter style. Doesn't really like to run a lot of offense. Doesn't really like to show a lot. Ethan, I wanted to kind of throw it to you. Just your general thoughts on the Purdue performance tonight. How much stock you're putting into it, and kind of where it's taking you.
This is kind of my thought with exhibitions in general. The results don't matter as much as the tape does. And, there were some quotes that Painter gave that the SEC network announcers were kind of talking about during the game where he said he wanted to see his guys get kicked around in this game a little bit. So he was not approaching this with a I want to come out here and win the game mindset. So while we can sit here and say like, oh, exhibition game, maybe not a lot to take away. Result doesn't matter. Purdue is still 0-0 on the season. I do think there are some concerning things we saw on film that if Purdue wants to stay the number one team in the country, if they want to win a national title this year, they're going to have to clean up.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think kind of the story of this game to me a little bit. I think the most concerning thing was how similar it felt to last year, in which it was kind of the three guys in Braden Fletcher and TKR kind of dominating everything this team did, and their weaknesses were as loud as their strengths in this one. I think part of that was how little scouting and preparation Purdue did for this. I mean, this is a team that I think there's a lot of value in how good the coaching staff for this team is, and that's part of what makes this team special. Is that Matt Painter and to a lesser extent PJ Thompson are coaching and running the X's and O's of this team, and not having that preparation, I think, hurts this group more than most because of what their limitations are. I just there's some athletic questions and some defensive questions to the point that there's not really a ton of guys who can go get you one for Purdue this year. And not that that's an awful thing or means that Purdue can't be a really special team this year. It just means that in this kind of more pickup style of basketball in which you don't really scout a ton and you don't really run a lot of offense, it leads to offense looking clunky. And then when you combine that with a really poor shooting night, going 3 for 17 from three, a 13-point loss on the road to a team in Kentucky that I think looked really, really good tonight. Stock up Kentucky for sure. That happens. That's what happens when you come in and you don't really play with a ton of energy and you don't shoot the ball very well and you don't prepare. 13-point loss is kind of to be expected to a team of Kentucky's caliber.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit on the preview of this game. Kentucky was without Jalen Lowe, their starting point guard, which was expected after he suffered a partially dislocated shoulder a week ago in a Kentucky scrimmage. Sounds like he's progressing well and healing well, but obviously not going to play him if you don't need him in a game like this. That doesn't matter when he's dealing with an injury. And then Jaden Quaintance, their starting center, is still recovering from offseason ACL surgery, and he'll be out another couple of months most likely. Otega Owe, SEC preseason player of the year, did play. He only played 17 minutes in this game. He was clearly on a minutes restriction. He was the first guy out of the lineup for Kentucky when they went to their bench. So, again, that wouldn't happen in a regular game. He's Kentucky's best player. So with that in mind, this was not a full-strength Kentucky team, which is not a great sign that Purdue was this uncompetitive in like the last 10 or so minutes of the second half. Didn't really feel like it was a game at that point. Purdue managed to claw back. It was 8-point halftime deficit for the Boilermakers. They cut the lead to 3 pretty early in the second half, and then Kentucky hit a couple of shots right after that, and it never really got that close again. There's two ways you can kind of look at this. You can say, well, it's just an exhibition. Purdue wasn't trying to win. Painter said so himself. He wanted to see his guys get humbled a little bit. This doesn't matter. This is not reflective of who Purdue is as a team and how they'll play when the games do matter. And you can also say, well, clearly Purdue's not the number one team in the country. They looked awful in this game. And I think both are probably true. This Purdue team that played tonight was not the number one team in the country, not even close. I think if Purdue plays like this, and we'll kind of dive into more of what we're talking about here, it's more than just the box score, it's more than just the shooting numbers. If Purdue replicates this type of performance in the future, I think this is going to be a team that's probably a borderline top 10 team for most of the season. I do think they have a slightly higher floor than they did last year, given the bench should be better, the center spot should be better. But um, I there after this game, I do think there is a very real chance Purdue is simply not a top five team in the country, and I'm not sure I expected that coming in.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. The kind of bright spot for me is you talked about that little mini run in, like at the beginning of the second half, and I think that coincided with really the only time that there was a concerted effort from the coaching staff to run any sort of offensive action or set or anything like that. And for the most part, when they did run those sets, they got kind of whatever they wanted a little bit offensively, and you saw Purdue kind of start to spurt. And I think this is a team, especially it's a Kentucky team, the way they wanted to run, that made baskets are going to be huge for this team. I think that defensively, I took a lot more away than I did offensively, just because offensively, I think we kind of have a baseline for what this team is going to be. We know they're going to be a good offensive team. They were a good offensive team last year. I don't think that they are going to regress much, if at all, offensively. I don't really see a path for a major regression offensively with what they brought back. But defensively, I think this game was kind of telling where Purdue's really limited, and Kentucky killed Purdue in transition. Combining those missed shot attempts with Purdue's inability to defend in transition, just an awful time to have a poor shooting night the way Kentucky wanted to run. And you saw Malachi Moreno have like 3 open transition just running the floor dunks because he just beat the Purdue bigs down the floor. However, I saw a lot of good things, I think, from the half court defense. It wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not going to act like the half court defense was phenomenal, but I think the half court defense wasn't bad, in my opinion. I think that even when Kentucky was able to score, a lot of times Purdue forced Kentucky to use the entire shot clock. They made things difficult. They made Kentucky hit some tough shots. There was a stretch at the end of the first half where Jasper Johnson got really hot for Kentucky, and a couple of like 26-second defensive possessions, and with a tough Jasper Johnson three. And he was just making shots. I mean, if he's a good shot maker, that's part of playing against a team as good as Kentucky is they're going to make shots sometimes. But I think that in half court, the defense definitely looked a lot better. I'm not sure how I feel about the Clough hedging thing. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I'm just not a huge fan of hedging in general. Um, I do think that Jacobson, especially in the half court, made a noticeable difference on defense. He was just a deterrent. I felt like he gave the guards a little bit of confidence on the perimeter too, and that they didn't have to be perfect. If they did get beat, there was kind of this little bit of a deterrent with the 7-4 shot blocker and Jacobson. I believe he had the one block. I'm not sure if he had a second one. Oscar Clough had a couple of blocks himself too. They're just the rim protection as a whole felt like it was there in a way it wasn't last year from the 5 position. I think that's the one positive from that spot tonight. But I wanted to kind of start with if you had a main winner from Purdue tonight. I know I certainly have one guy that I have circled as my biggest winner. Clearly, I was wondering if you had the same name.
So I think there's two names that come to mind in terms of big winners in this game, and neither of them play very much relative to some of the other players. Um, the first name I'm going to bring, probably not the same name you're going to mention. Jakari Harris looked very, very good tonight, I thought. He only played 15 minutes, which seems a little bit crazy. Now, Antoine West played 3 minutes in the first half. Those 3 minutes probably go to Jakari. If this is a regular season game, we can talk a little bit more about like redshirt takeaways and stuff on the main pod next week. But West, very, very strong redshirt candidate based on this game. Harris, like I said, only 15 minutes, didn't attempt a three, only attempted 2 shots, made both of them. He was just aggressive when he was on the floor, though. I know he only took 2 shots. The ball wasn't in his hands very much, but when he got his opportunities, man, he was flying around. I like his intensity on defense. He was much better about getting around screens in this game than he was last year, where it felt like every time he was on a point guard and they set a screen, he would just go flying around this, like just flying to the floor around those screens, trying to maybe be a little too aggressive. And he played more than himself. I thought he got downhill well. He was aggressive in transition, which I like to see. Purdue's transition offense in this game was not good at all. And Jakari was really one of the only players who got anything going in that sense. So I just like Jakari and kind of what he showed on both ends of the floor. Um, he, got his hands on all our passes, and this was generally disruptive, even if he didn't have, glorious box score numbers. And I really liked what I saw from him. So yeah, I'll stop it there, and I'll try to respond if
Yeah,
we had the same guy or if you were thinking of someone else.
yeah, Jakari was the name I had as well. I think 15 minutes was honestly not indicative of what he brought tonight. I thought he was the most positive, at least view I had on a play. I think he played the best out of anybody tonight. I don't think he had the best game box score wise out of everyone tonight. But if I was going through and grading players based on expectations for what they were going to bring, I mean, Jakari Harris probably receiving the highest grade from Purdue tonight, in my opinion. I thought, as you said, he was everywhere defensively in a way that I think he was kind of billed to be last year and wasn't. And that kind of, I think, rubbed people a little bit. I think that's where you saw kind of people fall out on Jakari Harris a little bit, is because kind of the sell on him was he was a special defender, and he just wasn't quite that defender last year. He was everywhere tonight defensively. I think when he was on the floor, he was, in my opinion, very clearly Purdue's best defender tonight. And as you said, he was super assertive on offense and very aggressive in a way that we didn't really see a ton last year. His only two shot attempts were both at the rim. He made both of them, including that and one in transition. As you said, he was really the only guy to get anything going transition wise for Purdue. And also coincidentally had was one of the only guys for Purdue with a positive plus minus tonight. And usually I don't really take a ton from plus minus. I think it's a very flawed stat, but in this case tonight, I think it backs up Jakari Harris playing winning basketball. And I think that my eyes told me Jakari Harris played winning basketball tonight. And I think that that positive plus minus backs that up. I'm curious to see where you go with your second name. I think my second name in the winners department would probably be Daniel Jacobson. I think there were some clear limitations. I also liked what I saw from Omer Mayer a little bit in tonight's game. He had some struggling moments, but he also had some pretty bright flashes in my opinion. I'm really curious to see where you go next with this.
So the other name that I thought was a clear winner in tonight's game, you mentioned him, Omer Meyer. He is someone whose limitations I think are pretty known at this point. Like I think based on all the reporting you've gotten over the summer, what we've seen with our own eyes on these scrimmages and in this game, he's going to be a liability on defense. I don't think you'll ever see him on the floor at the same time with both Braden and Fletcher Lawyer. But you did see him with one of those guys on the floor tonight. You saw him run some with Fletcher, and then Braden would sub back in for Fletch. And we did see some Omer and Braden on the floor together tonight, which was, something that we weren't sure we were going to see much of, if at all, this year. And, just Painter was clearly experimenting with rotations. We'll get into that a little bit more later. But it was still good to see them on the floor together. At least opens the door that we'll see them on the floor together during stretches this season. His defensive limitations were definitely there. I thought he looked pretty solid as an on-ball defender in this game. That Jakari transition and one, which is maybe one of the high points for the Purdue energy in this game, was started when he got a steal by pressuring the ball and dove to the floor to recover it. You like to see that. He's got the build to be a pretty solid on-ball defender, even if he's just not a very quick guy. I can see him getting cooked by some of the faster guards in the Big Ten, but for the most part, I thought it looked pretty solid. Off ball it's going to be a journey with him this season for sure, and you saw it even in this game. But Offensively, I liked what I saw from him as the lead ball handler. He had the one pretty bad turnover, like on his first position, and was very clean after that. Had 2 assists. It was only 2 assists from the floor, missed both of his threes, but he got to that elbow pull up really whenever he wanted to. It's just clearly something that Purdue's not like, yeah, just spam that like he was when he was playing with the Israeli U19 team over the summer, where he's taking like 15 or 20 of those a game. Clearly, that's not going to be the case here at Purdue, but you know, you go some scoreless stretches. Other guys weren't making plays. He just bring the ball down the court, and get to that spot on the floor, and it went in half the time. So, and that seems pretty low, I think, over the course of the season in terms of like that's his shot. So Meyer looked confident and in control throughout most of this game, which was good to say. I wasn't sure if he was going to look a little out of sorts, and especially in an environment like Rupp Arena, kind of not something we're talking about here, but one of the hardest places to play in the entire country, maybe the biggest arena, like biggest in terms of like spectacle and importance to college basketball generally, arenas in the country, and he didn't look like the lights were too bright. He only played 13 minutes, so I'm not sure how big his role is going to be, even in a situation like that, an exhibition game like this, where he did play quite a bit with Braden. Only 13 minutes, even still, but I like I like a lot of what I saw from Omer today.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the more that I think about it, I'm excited to kind of watch this game a second time tomorrow morning to see what I take back from this game. I think one of the biggest things for me when I watched Omer play is that the limitations weren't quite as loud as I thought they would be. Based on what we've been hearing a little bit, I kind of expected the defense to just be horrid, and I expected the kind of offense to look a little clunkier than it did. And I actually thought the defense wasn't bad at all. Off ball he wasn't good, but I think on ball he's not a guy that you can just really like. He's not a guy that opposing teams are going to see him on the floor and start to do him offense, where it's just whoever sees Omer across from him, just go at him because you can. I don't think he's a guy that you can just pick on defensively. He's going to get lost off ball. Thankfully, in my opinion, it's a lot easier to become a better off ball defender than it is to become a better on ball defender, because there's so much there on ball with the physical limitations that if you can be a good on ball defender, in my opinion, you can be a good off ball defender. And I think that he is at least a serviceable to average on ball defender. And I think that the defense could really start to catch hold as he gets comfortable playing in America. It's something that I don't think we kind of factored in enough in his transition, how different European basketball is than American basketball. And I think you talked about that first turnover, and I think that was the epitome of the transition. He looked confused, he looked lost. Stylistically, he didn't really look like he knew what to do on that first play, and it led to a really, really ugly turnover where he just kind of dribbled into like three guys and fell to the ground and lost control of the ball. And then he cleaned it up. And I think it was really telling that he cleaned it up. I think tonight I see a role for Omer in a way that I didn't going into the game. I kind of expected him before the game to just kind of clean up the backup point guard minutes. I think there's a world where one of the better lineups on this team features that Braden Smith, Jakari Harris, Omer Mayer guard lineup. I really liked what I saw from those three. I thought those were the best minutes that Purdue had all night, was when those three were on the floor together. I think there's a world where Omer starts to eat into Fletcher Lawyer's minutes a little bit in a way that I wasn't sure was going to happen previously, because I do think that the Braden Omer pairing works when Fletcher's not on the floor. I think those three can't play together. I think Braden and Omer together works. I think Fletcher and Omer together works. And obviously Braden and Fletcher together works. So I'm interested to see how the rotations shake out. But I think Purdue is going to want to have two of those three on the floor at all times and not have all three on the floor together.
I completely agree. I thought, you know, I was just impressed with what Meyer did in this game. His first real action in a Purdue uniform, not even real action, but first semi-real action in a Purdue uniform. He looked more comfortable than I expected him to, and he made his presence felt on defense in a way I wasn't even sure he was capable of. So, yeah, I
And
thought he did some good things. Go ahead.
and to piggyback off that before we get off Meyer, sorry to cut you off. I thought while I was talking about the limitations. I thought he got to the rim a little bit tonight. He had the one really nice move, kind of on the left wing, upper left corner, got to the rim. I thought it was a goaltend. I'm going to be honest. I couldn't believe they didn't call it a goaltend. I thought that one was a little more obvious than maybe it actually was. Um, and then he had a really nice play towards the end of the game where he gets to the rim and draws two guys and dumps it off to Jacobson for a dunk. There was some rim pressure there from him in a way that I was really, really, really concerned that he wasn't going to be able to get to the rim at all. He had very poor rim pressure numbers in the FIBA World Cup, and I think he was able to get to the rim tonight a little bit against a really good Kentucky backcourt that I think featured a lot of length and a lot of athleticism.
Yeah, I completely agree. And uh, might be time now to pivot a little bit into some losers from this game because I want to save the Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman, Red, Fletcher Laurie conversation for after this. I don't think either of us would classify any of them as losers in this game, but none of them played very well. So we can kind of talk about what we saw from them and what the concern level is there in a minute. But I do have two pretty clear losers in this game. And I'm going to start with Jack Benner and Liam Murphy. I'm going to kind of lump them together because I thought the backup 4 minutes were horrendous in this game. Um, and Murphy didn't play for like the final 2 minutes of the game when Painter emptied the bench, basically. Um, Benter is clearly the guy at the backup four. I don't think it's really speculation anymore. He was very clearly ahead of the rotation, and Murphy is not in the rotation at all. It looks like from how like even in this exhibition setting, he did not see the floor in meaningful minutes. Even Antoine West, who we both think is likely to redshirt, played before Murphy did. So Benter's the guy. He was not good in this game. 0 points, 0 for 2 from the floor. He did have 2 rebounds and 2 assists. So he's kind of doing that like versatile kind of other stuff we were talking about. He had 3 fouls though. He was just overwhelmed on defense, and that was pretty clear. And it's not like Trey Coughlin-Wren is an amazing defender, right? But in fact, we'll get into how bad TKR's defense was in this game a little bit later. But he's bigger and he's a better rebounder. And like if Benter, and I think this is what was pretty clear in this game, if Benter's not making shots, he offers nothing on the floor. And my concern is that that's exactly the same story with Liam Murphy, right? They're kind of the same players. Murphy's a little bit bigger, so at least you get a little bit more size out there with him on the floor. But if Benter's the more consistent shooter, then you just got to hope he's making shots and forcing the defense, like the opposing defense, to alter a little bit, which would open up the lane for other players in a way that there won't be with Trey Kaufman-Wren on the floor. But yeah, he played 10 minutes in this game. I don't have the plus minus in front of me. I'm guessing it's one of the worst in the team. He was getting torched on defense, and if his shot's not going down, he really doesn't offer this team much else.
Yeah, so I'm actually probably going to shock you. Jack Benner and Liam Murphy tied for the second highest plus minus on the team. They
It
were both
is
at a plus.
shocking.
They were both at a +2 actually. So I believe part of that was Liam Murphy playing the last 2 minutes and 30 seconds of a game that was like 17 points spread
Yes.
when he checked in.
Yes.
So hence why I'm not a huge believer in the plus minus box score watching. I think you hit the nail on the head with the backup four spot, but I want to lump one more guy into my kind of group of losers. I think Antoine West also belongs in that group. Unfortunately, I don't think it means a ton for him in the future. I think he has a very, very bright future at Purdue, but he was so clearly the sixth guard in this game, not just in the rotation, but in the sense that I think he was every bit as bad as and like an Omer Mayer defensively. I think he looked lost off ball on offense. I don't think the fit's there this year. I don't think he's got the shooting this team needs from that spot. I think that it's very, very, very clear to me that this is just a matter of time before we announce his red shirt this year. But to go off the backup 4 minutes, I agree they were pretty horrendous, and It is a spot that is a little bit pigeonholed by how many guys want that role in the first place. Like you're limited on the type of player you can get for that role just because not many guys want to sign up for 5 minutes a game and two shots and that's about it. And you don't really do anything. That's a tough sell. And so it leads to having players like Jack Benner and Liam Murphy who are very, very limited in what they do. I think the one, if I could get really nitpicky with this roster build, the one nitpick I think I would have is I would have rather seen two different styles at the backup four. So instead of bringing in a Liam Murphy and having these two guys who are both only shooters, I would have rather brought in a guy who probably not as good as Mo Diabate, obviously, because he's a very talented player. He's good enough to play 25, 30 minutes a game in Kentucky, I think. Not going to get that at Purdue, but that kind of style of like athletic garbage man four who's out there to play defense, rebound, play hard, be physical, and might not bring a ton basketball skill wise, but you're able to play that guy when Jack Benner isn't hitting shots or Liam Murphy if he's the shooter. And tonight Jack Benner wasn't hitting shots and he was unplayable. And I think
Yeah,
that's I worry that that is going to continue to happen at the backup four, especially with these guys having such limited roles. The shooting variations are are going to happen. Thankfully, I do think that it's going to be a very, very limited part of Purdue's rotation at this point is those backup
um,
4 minutes. I've never felt more confident about Trey Kaufman playing 35 minutes a game in my life.
he for as bad as he was defensively in this game, he only had one foul in 28 minutes. Um, we kind of speculated this earlier in the offseason, but him playing the four, I think it's not going to fix his defensive issues, but it should help keep him out of foul trouble because he's not going to be getting demolished in the post and picking up cheap fouls that way nearly as often. And he's also not. He also would pick up fouls setting screens where you get wide or would just cause
Not
moving
get set.
screens. Like
Yeah,
he
just not
just
get set.
not get set like that. Shouldn't happen as much with Clough and Jacobson, being the screen center of the pick and roll or pick and pop a little bit more often. Just it'll take some of the opportunities for Trey to pick up fouls out of the game, which should help keep him on the floor. Like in this game, again, as bad as he was defensively, Pinner could have played him 35 minutes if he wanted to, and it wouldn't nothing catastrophic would have happened. He's not forcing himself off the court with foul trouble in this game, and I'm sure there will be times where he'll get into foul trouble this year. He's just not a super disciplined defender, so that tends to happen from time to time. But it shouldn't be a weekly occurrence where, we saw last season Painter was toying with lineups and bringing in Will Berg for 3 minute stretches in the NCAA tournament to prevent TKR from getting himself into foul trouble. Because if he didn't, he was a lock for 2 fouls by the half and sometimes three. So
Yeah, I think another positive I had to take away from Trey Kaufman Ren was he's a lot more disciplined in his rebounding. I think that was kind of part of what was a big reason for his foul trouble last year, and that no one talked about is that he was probably our best rebounder last year, even though he isn't a great rebounder. He still is probably our best rebounder last year.
he led the team in rebounds last year for sure.
And that led to him picking up a lot of ticky tacky fouls in rebounding situations where he's fighting two guys at a time because he's the only guy down there. He's our best rebounder. We're clearing out everything for him underneath. And now he's fighting two. He's already an undersized, under athletic four that's now fighting two guys bigger than him for rebounds. And you saw him at times kind of shove people and just pick up stupid fouls that you pick up when you're fighting for rebounds and you're overmatched physically. And that was kind of the story with him rebounding last year. I thought he was actually fine rebounding the basketball tonight. I know that people like to nitpick TKR's rebounding defense, and I think his defense was just horrendous tonight. But he had 5 rebounds. I didn't really notice him, getting manhandled on the glass. I think Mo Diabate had some success rebounding the basketball, but he's going to do that against pretty much everybody he sees this year. That's just kind of his game. 5 rebounds for Trey Kaufman Ren. I think if he's in the 5 to 6 rebounds a game, with this team, I think that's pretty good rebounding from the four. I don't think you're expecting too much more. And I don't think it's fair to expect too much more, especially if this guy's going to lead the team in scoring. How much can you really put on a guy? I know that we have high hopes for Trey Kaufman-Renn, and he's a very good player, but to expect the guy to be the leading scorer and carry the load scoring wise while also going for like 8 or 9 rebounds a game, that's a really special player. And TKR is just not that guy, especially rebounding the basketball. But on the bright side, I think that there's only one way to go for the two centers, and that's up. I think that they looked really, really, really clunky tonight. Part of that, I think, was the not scheming things. I think where you saw it hurt the most that this team didn't run offense was Trey Kaufman-Renn. I think a lot of what he does on offense, I'm not saying he's a product of the system because I think he's a very talented player, but a lot of what he does comes off of unique things that Purdue runs for him. And they're able to run them because he's such a good player. But part of what makes him such a good player is these positions that Painter puts him in. And I don't think that you really saw a lot of schemes to clear things out for him to give him the space. And that led to a lot of clunkiness. You saw 3 turnovers to no assists. I think that's an anomaly. I think that is the biggest one area of this Purdue team that you can say that you can throw out the window because of the exhibition. I think that's how clunky the front court looked offensively.
Yeah, my other big loser for this game was Oscar Clough. Um, and I do think you're right. I think this might be the least, aside from the shooting splits, it might be the least like consistent data point to take from this game. Like the least, the thing you can read into the least from this game might be the center spot. But Clough just was not what he was built to be. There was some concern because he came from South Dakota State where he played last year, and he was one of the best. He was not one, bar none, the best rebounder in the sport at South Dakota State last year, and he averaged double-digit points as one of the best low post scorers as well, right? The year before that, he was at Washington State, a very loaded Washington State team, by the way, that featured 2 NBA guys in Jalen Wells and Isaac Jones, as well as Ruben Chielu, who was the starting center on Florida's national title team last year. He's back this year. And then a name Purdue fans will also be familiar with, Miles Rice, who actually won Pac-12 Freshman of the Year in the final year of that league before transferring to Indiana last year, where he struggled more in the Big Ten, and he's at Maryland now. But, those are 6 guys who are all like 2 NBA guys, a national champion, a starter on a number 1 team, and the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. That team was a 6 seed and lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament. And Oscar Clough averaged 8 and 5 that year. Those are some Caleb Furstian numbers, and that was the only year that Clough played at the high major level, and that was 2 years ago. And he did not look like the same player as South Dakota State last year. And I don't think even after this game there's any reason to think that Clough is going to be 8 and 5 and nothing more for this Purdue team. He's a 15% better Caleb Furst. That's not what I'm trying to say. I don't think that's true. However, there were some skeptics of the signing that said, or the transfer edition, we won't call it a signing, transfer edition of Oscar Clough, that basically were saying, like, the last time we saw this guy at a high major level, he was not a difference maker, right? And the fit with him and TKR is naturally clunky. So there's a chance that this just kind of doesn't work. And if you were on that before, nothing you saw in this game is going to make you rethink that stance. Because Trey Kaufman-Renn, who's catching the ball a little further out than he normally does, he was clearly bothered by Clough sort of being locked into the post with him. Clough and Jacobson did go 1 for 1 from 3 in this game. There were plenty of times Clough caught the ball on the perimeter and there was really no one around him, and he wasn't even looking to shoot. It does not look like something Painter wants him doing in any game setting, at least not right now. So, in that sense, if he's going to go 1 from the floor, 1 for 2 from the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 2 assists in 22 minutes, that's what Caleb Furst averaged last year, basically. There's only, like you said, you can only go up from here for Clough, and I do think he'll play better than this. Um, if you were skeptical of the fit before, you only believe that you're stronger now. And even people like me who thought, yeah, even though it's not natural, they should be able to figure it out. There's a chance it's just sort of an awkward, clunky fit all year. A little bit like what Zach Edey and Trey Kaufman-Renn were Zach Edey's senior year, where it was, yeah, the fit's a little clunky, but Trey is just too good to keep off the floor. He only played like 18 minutes a game that year though because Zach was just that good. I don't know if Trey Kaufman-Renn's not Zach Edey, and if you're going to tailor the front court around Trey the way we did around Zach, that's just going to mean playing more Deion Jacobson and less Oscar Clough, even though Clough is, I think, pretty clearly the better option in a vacuum over Jacobson.
Yeah, I honestly, at this point, I'm not sure I'm ready to say that. I think the center spot became a little bit more up for grabs throughout the season. I did not see a path going into this game for Jacobson to have a bigger role than Clough. Coming out, I see it. I think Jacobson looked a little bit better tonight, and part of that is I just think he fits better with Trey Kaufman-Renn. I think he patches the holes in Trey Kaufman-Renn's game a little bit more, fits a little bit better on offense. However, the one thing for Clough is he was a lot better in the second half, in my opinion, than he was in the first. I still don't think he was good, but he was at least more productive. He went into halftime with, I believe, 0-0. He might have had a rebound in the first half. Um, didn't score in the second half, but had at least 4 rebounds, if not 5. Uh, he was just kind of a little bit better in the second half. I felt like he figured it out just a little bit. I think I would not be shocked to see a situation similar to that Edey team, as you mentioned, in which Trey Kaufman-Renn had to play a little bit, and there were games where he played a lot more than 18 minutes per game in that game, and there were games where he played a lot less than 18 minutes, depending on the matchup. I think you could see that happen with Clough and Jacobson. I think that there's a world Jacobson just fits so much better with Trey Kaufman-Renn that you would rather see Jacobson in those minutes, even if he's slightly worse than Clough, he allows Trey Kaufman-Renn to be a lot better than Clough does. And I think that may lead to Clough kind of feasting with the second unit a little bit. I think you'll see Clough get all of the run when Trey Kaufman-Renn is off the floor. I think Oscar Clough will be the center. And I think that'll be what's best for this team is in every single minute that Trey Kaufman-Renn's off the floor, Oscar Clough needs to be the center. And that'll probably coincide with Braden Smith minutes. I think you'll potentially see a Braden Jacari, Omer Mayer, like Jack Benner, Oscar Clough lineup be a really fun, unique lineup that Purdue goes to throughout the year that offers some unique things with, I think, without being quite as limited as their starting lineup can be at times.
Yeah, I think, you know, Jacobson only played 18 minutes in this game compared to Clough's 22, which is a little bit closer than I think I thought they would be. Maybe not in this game, but I mean, Braden played 32, Fletch played 31, TKR played 28 minutes. CJ Cox played 24, which is about where he was last year, or maybe a little bit more than he was last year. But that's you'd expect TKR and Braden to play a little bit more, typically, but that's a rough approximation of what those season averages are going to be. So maybe this is kind of the plan is to basically split the meds almost 50-50 between Clough and Jacobson and give Clough the slight edge there. And if so, I can see it. I thought Jacobson played a pretty solid game. There's still some clear limitations. He's slow getting up and down the court, which is not ideal. He was one of the main players that Kentucky was just feasting on in transition. I thought Clough did a lot better at preventing some of those easy transition buckets. Not that he was great, but it wasn't quite as 2 or 3 steps behind as Jacobson was. Other than that, though, Jacobson was pretty solid in post defense. I thought he offered some clear rim protection that Clough really didn't. Clough did have the one block, which looked like it might have been a goaltending. but usually have a call you're going to see in an exhibition game. Um, Regardless, like they kind of went at Clough, and you could tell like, he's just a bigger presence than Caleb First, and his size alone just made some tougher shots around the rim than we saw against Purdue's defense last year. And Kentucky missed some of the ones right around the rim. I was not super impressed with his rebounding off those misses, though. We got like Purdue gave up some second chance buckets where he just wasn't able to grab a rebound, or he kind of got batted around and rolled out of bounds. Like for everything else, all the offensive questions, the lack of rim protection, the one thing that Clough was the sell on him was like garbage man, rebounder, and finisher, right? Like he's going to do all the dirty work down low. He's going to fix the rebounding problems when he's on the floor by himself. We didn't really see that in this game. Coffin Wren did play 6 more minutes, but they both tied with 5 rebounds. Jacobson also had 5 rebounds in this game. I do think the rebounding will be better for Purdue this year just because it would be extremely difficult for it to be worse. But I don't think you're coming out of this exhibition feeling great about the state of rebounding. On the offensive end, it was definitely clunky. Clough and TKR clearly get in the way of each other positionally, like where they are on the court during an offensive set, which means you're not going to have both around the rim, right? Like if this is a play where they're getting a TKR post touch, they're going to have Clough away from the basket, which means he's not going to be in position to grab that rebound. And that kind of limits the impact he can have on that end of the floor rebounding. So it's just an exhibition game. There's no reason to think these are necessarily trends that are going to continue throughout the year. But there's definitely some concern. I mean, the one thing, Malachi Moreno, who got most of the backup center for Kentucky, who got most of his work in transition, the one transition bucket he got, or the one non-transition bucket he got, he went straight through Clough's chest very easily. And that's just not the sort of thing you want to see, right? Because, Clough's not a rim protector, but he's supposed to be a good back to the basket, drop coverage, post defender, and he didn't really show that in this game.
Yeah, I think part of this might have been just Clough didn't play well because, like, I think you talked about that Malachi Moreno bucket. Like, respectfully, Daniel Jacobson was out physicaling Malachi Moreno for most of this game, I think. Yeah. And Daniel Jacobson does not out physical Oscar Clough. So I think that part of this was just a poor game from Oscar Clough. He just didn't play well. Sometimes that happens with guys, and when you're talking about one game sample sizes, like sometimes guys don't play well, and I think a large portion of Purdue's guys didn't play particularly well tonight. I think Jacobson, the thing I'd say is if he's rebounding at Clough's level, which he did tonight, he had 5 rebounds, Clough had 5 rebounds, and Jacobson played less minutes than Clough did. There's no reason to keep Jacobson off the floor for Clough if Clough isn't rebounding significantly better than Jacobson. Because if Clough doesn't bring significantly better rebounding than Jacobson, he doesn't really bring anything that helps his team more than what Jacobson brings, in my opinion. So I really hope it's an anomaly. I think it is. I think part of it was there were times where Purdue's effort was a little questionable, a little lackadaisical. I wonder how much of that is a team that has played so much college basketball and had so much success before is like, oh, this is an exhibition against Kentucky. Now, I really hope that doesn't transition into the season. I don't want us to, be like, oh, this is Nebraska. We should just beat Nebraska, because you'll lose Big Ten games doing that. And the Big Ten championship does mean something. So I think it was a little bit of an anomaly. I think I liked what Jacobson saw, but yeah, I'm a little concerned about the Clough fit. I do think that I think the scheme gets a lot better though. But on that note, I do feel like we've kind of covered, most of the players almost one by one on Purdue tonight. Hopefully this was a great, kind of recap for what we saw. It was a little bit longer than I kind of anticipated it being, but I feel like we had a lot of good conversations. I think there was a lot to take away from tonight. It felt like a good reset on expectations. It feels like a little bit of let's temper things. We haven't won a national championship yet. There's a lot of Purdue fans I know that kind of want to crown this team before they do anything. And tonight, I think, was a good reset for expectations to say we have a really fun team, but we still have to win the games in front of us. So there were some positives, there were some negatives. Overall, it was an exhibition, so it probably largely means absolutely nothing. And we spent 45 minutes talking about something that didn't mean anything. But
One thing I'll quickly wrap this up with is overall, I don't think there's any reason to panic if you're a Purdue fan. If you're
represent,
a Kentucky fan, you should absolutely feel fantastic coming out of this. I think stock up Kentucky. Uh, Jasper Johnson, you got a special one there. I think he looked fantastic. Mo Diabate was great. Aberdeen, I thought was really impressive. Owe looked good when he was on the floor, and you were without two or three best players. So stock up Kentucky, and for Purdue, I mean, Painter said it himself. This is what he wanted this game to look like. He wanted his guys to face this adversity and to have a lot to study on film tomorrow and to kind of reset crown preseason number one. And there's a long basketball season to go before they're actually at the top of the mountain.
yeah, I want to get a hot take out there. It doesn't have anything to do with Purdue. I think there's a world where Denzel Aberdeen is the best of him, Boogie Fland, and Xavier Lee this year. I know you mentioned Jasper Johnson. Denzel Aberdeen looked like a get in the transfer portal. That's a guy who didn't play very much at Florida last year. He was behind a lot of talent at the guard spot. He looked incredible tonight, in my opinion. Just quick on Kentucky before we get out of here. He looked awesome. I think they have a lot of depth at the guard spot. Stock way up on Kentucky for me, and
For sure.
Denzel Aberdeen, I think, is a real one that they got, and I'm very excited to see what this backcourt looks like. I think they've got four fantastic guards between Jalen Lowe, Denzel Aberdeen, Jasper Johnson, and Otega Owe. I think that's a great group of four.
Absolutely. I always liked what I saw from Aberdeen last year at Florida. He was huge in the title game against Houston. You know, people forget how Florida was down like 10 points in the second half of that game, and he kind of came in and stabilized things. The three guards he was behind, by the way,
All
Walter
in the NBA?
Clayton. Walter Clayton, currently a member of the Utah Jazz. Elijah Martin, currently a member of the Toronto Raptors. Will Richard, currently a member of the Golden State Warriors. So yeah, it was behind three NBA roster guys.
And
And
legit NBA. I mean, these are not like two-way.
no, none of
These
these
are
guys are on two ways. Yeah.
yeah, these are legit NBA guards that he was behind, and he looks like he might be one himself if he carries on this developmental path. But on that note, we've got more Purdue basketball in just 5 days as they play U Indy on the 29th. That is, I believe that's Wednesday. So
Wednesday.
we will have a recap for that. Very excited to overreact to that game as well. Hopefully, in the positive side, we can come on to that recap and hopefully be like, oh my God, we're going to win a national championship this year. But, it wouldn't be Purdue basketball without some overreactions throughout the year. So I'm very excited to see where this team goes. A lot of good, a lot of bad, as we said. So we'll be watching, all the way through. So thanks for listening, everyone. We will have a preview up for that UND game. It'll probably be a lot shorter than this recap. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. And thanks for listening, everyone.